Welcome to Inside Asia. Today we have very special guest, Professor Amitav Acharya of American University. He is a very well-known globalist. He has been written tons of books, more than 20 books, hundreds of articles on international relations and security, and he is very knowledgeable about ASEAN. Professor Amitav Acharya, thank you for joining our program Inside Asia. With the sea changes in North Africa, Middle East, what is your reading?
Pro-democracy upheavals, the demonstrations, they are really quite significant for the political change in the Middle East. But they're also very important for the rest of the world. Because, Middle East has been left behind in the wave of democratization that had swept other parts of the world, Eastern Europe,
even in the past 3 decades.
Yeah, it was the region that was least susceptible, least exposed, or least receptive to ideals of democracy and democratic political systems. So it's good to see that the region finally, catching that trend. It's not a wave yet. We don't know whether these demonstrations will lead to, actual viable.
Why you said it's not a wave? It's a ride,
Well, what we see is now a series of anti-government protests. As a result of that, dictators who have been in power for a long time are on the run. But what replaces them? We don't know that yet. Too early. I mean, we don't know what kind of a system will be in place in Egypt. We don't know what kind of a system will come into place in Tunisia.
So the jury is still out.
The jury is still out. So it'll be a little too early. It's good to see that dictatorships who have been there for such a long time are finally they run for their money and they're on the defensive.
What were the major reasons from your point of view? Economic, political, contingent effects of the global changes? What exactly?
Let's start with the political. I think people are simply fed up with having the same person ruling them year after year, decade after decade. In the case of Egypt, 30 years, Gaddafi even more, and Tunisia, 20 odd years. So people want change. The political factor is absolutely important, and people just don't want another kind of the same person or same kind of leader replacing them. They want actually democracy. We have to accept that these people are looking for a more free political system. Economically also, I think you see Tunisia in the case of Egypt in particular, Yemen, these countries, these rulers have not performed economically. They have not really delivered the goods. They have underperformed. So there's a lot of frustration, a lot of anger at corruption, mismanagement, nepotism, missed opportunity for development. So that's really fitting into it as well. But there is also this, I would say, there's a normative dimension to it. I mean, people really, I think the ideas that human rights, democracy, they're important, that they are transcultural, that are universal, that idea is spreading, and that's what is inspiring a lot of these people.
So do you credit the advance of information technologies that people around the world know what's happening here and there, that encourage them to be much more encouragers to go out on the street, or there are something else?
No, I think information technology, the media, the mediums like Facebook, Twitter, cell phones are absolutely crucial to this. So the media plays kind of 2 roles here. One is that you watch what's happening in another country or another part of the world, and you feel inspired by it. But at the same time, when you get inspired, you want to do something, then you also have this media, new media, that like Facebook, like Twitter, like messaging through cell phones, and then you can use that to empower you. So yes, I think media is absolutely, the new media, the new information technology is absolutely crucial.
But when you talk about economic factors, can you explain a little bit more? Because Middle East has benefit from this oil crisis, after oil crisis, some of this country that you see changes like Libya is pretty well off, Even in Egypt, things are not that bad.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Middle East is a big region, so we cannot generalize. about whether economic or even political conditions.
Yes.
So in country like Saudi Arabia, a country like even Libya, those countries have done well because they have oil resources. Although you could say that in Libya's case at least, a lot of the wealth was squandered. So people are not poor, but they feel that they could have been much richer if the regime had not wasted its money doing, like exporting terror or instability or supporting radical movements or simply for corruption and personal gratification. But in the Gulf states, I mean, you look at the Gulf states, Bahrain is actually the poorest among the Gulf states. So there is that, the economic factor is there, unemployment and lack of opportunity is important. Saudi Arabia is different. It's one of the richest countries, and but there the political factor, we don't have big demonstrations in Saudi Arabia at the moment, but the political factor does matter. But if you bring together Egypt, Tunisia, Yemen, Jordan, I mean, these are relatively poor countries, and where the governments have not performed as well as they should have. And the other economic factor is that even in countries like Saudi Arabia, it's just one factor, one source of wealth, that's oil. When the oil, so the fortunes of the economy depends on resources, and resources are not the best way to have long-term sustainable development.
Was this the same so-called resource curse that occurred in Africa? Because you mentioned this with Libya, Saudi Arabia. So far, they have done well.
Well, I think in the case of Libya, you can say the resource curse does work, does operate. Saudi Arabia's case is a little different because for a variety of reasons, it's a small population, large country, lot of resources, not just a little. And the monarchy also has been cautious and careful, and also has the support of the clergy. So it has managed to keep the stability, and it has not abused its resources in the way that we find in Libya or in other African countries like Nigeria. So the resource course do not apply to Saudi Arabia at this moment. But nonetheless, in all the Gulf states, the oil-rich states in the Middle East, you'll find that they haven't developed industrial economies. They haven't moved beyond this resource economy to a sustainable industrial economy or financial economy. Yes. They have not achieved this kind of what Singapore has done, what Hong Kong has done, or what India and China are doing, so that in decreasing their reliance on the primary sector and making themselves a modern industrial economy. The Middle East hasn't done that.
What is interesting, what you said, you mentioned political factors, you mentioned economic factors. There's additional factors, that is the young populations. How, from your point of view, see the roles of the young people in bringing these revolutionary changes?
Again, in countries like Egypt or Tunisia, where there's a large number of youth population, a large size youth population. These are people, a good portion of that is without employment or are underemployed. So they get frustrated, and when you don't have job, you are frustrated, you are angry, you are ready to do something radical, you are susceptible to all kinds of negative influences. So I think that is a key factor when you have a large number of young people who are exposed to all this
globalization
and lifestyle, but they see that they don't have the economic opportunities that will allow them to enjoy that lifestyle. So they get frustrated, and when you are frustrated, you are vulnerable to all kinds of manipulation or radical influences. But in this case, also simply that you want change. You want to have rulers who can provide you that opportunity.
So how do you link the two? Economic developments, freedom, and liberties?
I think they are closely linked. Lack of economic opportunity makes people, including the young people we talk about, to want change, leadership change, regime change in their own countries, because they blame it on their rulers, that they have not provided those opportunities. And this is true of countries like Egypt, Tunisia, Yemen. It may not be true so much of Saudi Arabia, but even in Jordan, even in Bahrain, you can say that the economic unhappiness and frustration, lack of economic opportunity does play into the political anger and the demand for change of regime.
But for decades, they were strong belief that economic development will surely usher in democratic developments. You want to dispute that? Because what happened in Egypt, in Libya, is a little bit different.
It is true that economic development after a certain level makes people want political change.
Correct.
But the flip side of that is that economic underdevelopment also makes people want change. If the underdevelopment persists under the same ruler, under the same regime, people get frustrated because they don't have economic opportunity. They also want change. So I would say that what we see in the Middle East today is kind of putting an earlier argument upside down, that in this case, not economic development leading to political change, but economic underdevelopment leading to demands for political change.
So you need to look at much more holistically in this sense then.
Not only holistically, we have to rethink our assumptions about what democracy means and what brings about democracy. We have to really rethink our existing theories or ideas. Another thing very obvious here is that we see in the case of Egypt, case of Tunisia, democracy is a bottom-up thing. It's not something you can impose from outside. It's not something necessarily people get because there is a big global crisis, like the end of the Cold War, which led to democratization, democratic changes in Eastern Europe.
Berlin Walls and all that.
Here we don't have that global big event, but people simply want change because that's something driven from below.
So I'd like to draw you into Asian politics a little bit. What sort of lesson? Because you can probably give a very good comparative perspective on these developments, political development vis-a-vis economic changes.
Now, in Southeast Asia, we have seen many examples in the past of people's power. We saw that in Philippines against Marcos. We saw that to some extent in Thailand. The people rising up against rulers and demanding change and sometimes getting it. Now, in Southeast Asia, however, it's not economic factors per se. It's the general political factors have been very important in demand for regime change. All the corruption has been always one big factor here. If you look at how Middle East events are going to impact on China, you say that they should not impact China at all because China is growing. It's done fantastically well economically under a very dictatorial regime, the Communist Party of China. So should people then not worry about political change in China? But having said that, just now doesn't mean that China will not feel any shockwave. China will feel the impact in a number of ways. One is that the Chinese government used to say that this democracy movement is all kind of Western inspired. The West is imposing democracy and sometimes it's a foreign conspiracy. Now, when you look at Egypt, there's nothing foreign about this demand for democracy. So the Chinese leaders have to then go back now and rethink their assumption that I'm pretty sure they knew this before, that democracy is a demand from below, not just a conspiracy from outside. But now they cannot say that. If they say that, they'll be put on the defensive. Look at what is happening in Egypt. How can you say that it's a Western conspiracy?